So today is Brain Health webinar number 4, and I'm going to talk about natural strategies to reduce your blood pressure. And obviously this applies to people who have hypertension. And today's webinar is actually sort of like a part 2 of one that I had done, I think it was sometime last year. So when you receive the recording, you're going to receive the previous one as well. Hopefully I can find it. And I'm Dr. Shabnam Daskar. I'm a functional medicine doctor. I'm in Alberta in Canada. And I'm going to start with sharing my screen. So I have talked about blood pressure before and hypertension. And so I'm not going into the definition of what is high blood pressure or hypertension. There is, in 2017, there was a change in the numbers of what we thought was better. And incidentally, in women, it is possible that the normal levels should be lower. We are still waiting for more data to come up. Bottom line is, number one, do you know your blood pressure? And well, that's a note to myself too. I need to check my blood pressure again. I haven't done it for a while. So one of the things is, with hypertension, a lot of people don't know that they have it because hypertension does not cause a lot of symptoms for many people. And for those who, most of the commonest way hypertension is detected is either you had it checked at your doctor, or someone had a machine at home and you just decided, okay, everyone is going to get their blood pressure checked, and you got it done. So that is again another way. So importantly, even if you are not able to go to your doctor for just to get a blood pressure check because of the ongoing pandemic or anything, it is definitely worth getting a home blood pressure monitor. Check your blood pressure, and not just once. So I have talked about this before. Ideally, you need to do a 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure test, which is a test for which you have to go to the that's a special device. That's not something I would recommend you buy because you're just going to use it for yourself. So you wear this blood pressure cuff for 24 hours, and there's a device which records it. That is something, depends on where in the world you are. You can ask your doctor to prescribe for that. Or in some places, particularly in India, you can directly go to some of the major hospitals and ask for that test. That is one of the best tests you can do for your health. If you haven't done it, do check for that. If you can't do that, at least check your blood pressure at home. So a normal blood pressure is 120/80. Now, the point is, if you are at that blood pressure level with one medication, that is excellent. Could you try to go lower? Maybe, but that does not mean. So my point is, I don't want to say that you need to reach a lower blood pressure by adding 20,000 medications, because as you know, some medications have side effects. And so the idea is, are there things that you can do for yourself at home? And if you're, this is not medical advice, please check with your doctor. But I want to share some natural things that you can do for yourself. And there are lots of things you can do for blood pressure in addition to taking your medications. And I have some patients who will tell me, doctor, I don't want to be on a medication. Your blood pressure is 150/100. You cannot not take a medication, at least initially. So this is my approach. And again, there is no one right approach. But what is not acceptable is having high blood pressure. Whether we bring it down with medication plus lifestyle changes or natural strategies, as many of you like to call them, or is it by taking more than one medication and supplements, that depends on each person. But what is absolutely not negotiable is not having your blood pressure at a normal level. So just 2 days ago, I had a gentleman talking to me. He was 49 from India. He's saying, oh, I had blood pressure in the past and I was on medication. I'm not on medication now. I said, you mean to say your blood pressure is normal now? He said, yes, my doctor says it is okay. I said, what is your blood pressure? I said, did you lose a lot of weight? He said, no, I've not lost weight recently. His blood pressure was 140/80. I said, that is not really normal for someone who's 49. You have to prepare for the next 40, 50 years of your life. So that is not okay. But do you need a medication? That is a question you have to have a discussion with your doctor. But don't go by the higher numbers. Lower in some situations is better, but how you achieve that lower number is also important, because like I said, many medications, and some of my patients say, doctor, I started the second medication, then I had all these problems, so I stopped the second medication, now I don't know what my blood pressure is. So that is not okay. So obviously, you know that I'm going to talk about, few things. Food is most important, food and drinks, sleep, supplements, and there are a whole lot of other additional strategies as well to help lower your blood pressure. Which ones should you take? Should you use? That again depends on you, and you need to have a conversation with your healthcare provider, which are the most appropriate ones. My job is to give you a bunch of ideas. And for some things like food and sleep, and food, drinks, and sleep, these are things that you can do for yourself. So when it comes to food, what happens? Most of the time, if you just do a Google search for blood pressure, food for lowering blood pressure, what are the ones that you come across? One of the commonest ones is the DASH diet, so dietary approach to stop hypertension. Next will come Mediterranean diet. And I don't think any conversation about food and blood pressure comes without a conversation about salt intake. So what am I going to talk about? Uh, number one is food is extremely important in terms of managing your blood pressure better. And what are the underlying principles? So I have talked about insulin resistance, and basically insulin resistance is a problem of your carbohydrate insulin metabolism. It is also called pre-diabetic status, or it is also called metabolic syndrome. So basically, insulin resistance is how do you know whether you have it? If you have diabetes type 2, type 1, some of them also have insulin resistance, but I'm not going there. If you have PCOS, or if you've been told by your doctor that your blood glucose levels are climbing, or your hemoglobin A1C is higher, and I'm not talking about hemoglobin A1C today because I've talked about that before, or you have fatty liver, or you have your liver enzymes are raised, but there is no other liver disease, or you have you know mm, you need extreme exercise to maintain your body composition, you have belly fat, or you had, if you a woman had pregnancy diabetes. All these conditions are conditions of insulin resistance. Along with that, primary hypertension. So all high blood pressure or hypertension is not a problem of insulin resistance. But the commonest hypertension, though I don't like to call it the garden variety, because there's nothing garden variety about hypertension. So the commonest hypertension, which most people have, is also related to insulin resistance. Interestingly, there was a paper which showed that the genes that are associated with hypertension are also the genes which are related to insulin and insulin resistance and carbohydrate metabolism. So that's not a surprise to us. So what happens is, if you're looking at the continuum of insulin resistance, some of you may have hypertension 7 to 8 years before a diagnosis of maybe diabetes comes up. But does it mean that at that point, when you were diagnosed with hypertension, your blood glucose levels were absolutely normal? Very likely not. So you are in this continuum already. Some people manifest hypertension much earlier than diabetes. Some may show up as diabetes before hypertension, but hypertension and diabetes are very commonly present at the same time in the same person. So obviously, I mean, it is the same underlying pathology, underlying problem of insulin resistance that is driving both of these factors. So one is to know that. So next is, I'm talking about food. So when it comes to food, whatever changes you see in your health in terms of food will depend on what your baseline food intake is. So the thing is, someone who is eating a food which is predominantly a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of burgers and pizzas and bread and pasta and rice and roti, and a lot of eating outside or eating sugar sweetened beverages like soda or fruit juices. For someone like that, if that person changes their food from predominantly processed carbohydrates to something that is less processed, that person is going to see a whole lot more changes in not just their blood pressure, in their overall health. They lose weight, their blood glucose levels are better, inflammation is better, all these things are improved, that their lipids are better. But someone, let us say you are someone who already eats very healthy, you don't eat processed food, you don't eat sugary stuff, you don't eat you don't eat at any hour of the day or night. For someone like you, you may need to do a much deeper dive. So when you read these things about the DASH diet, the dietary approaches to manage hypertension, DASH diet is one of the commonest diet, or the Mediterranean diet. What I want to highlight is we eat food. So I would like you to go away from the diet mentality. Diet is for a short time, and my blood pressure is going to become normal, and I'm going to stop eating that way. No, it doesn't work like that. This is a whole life change. So it's not a diet. It is what you're eating on an everyday basis. So what does the Mediterranean diet or the DASH diet not include? Number one is it is low in sugar. There is almost no sugar in all of these. There are no processed carbohydrates. There are no processed food. There are what is recommended in those diet is a lot of real food. As I say, you will not find cookies and biscuits or pizzas on any of those diets. Uh, so one of the recommendations of the Mediterranean diet is whole grains. And I have talked about this before. Whole grains are not necessarily healthy for all, particularly when it comes to blood glucose levels. And because whole grains can raise your blood glucose levels and inflammation levels in many, what ends up happening is your blood pressure can also go up. So whole grains is one that, it's not always healthy for everyone, but if you read stuff on the internet, you'll always find mostly even doctors talking about it. A diet based on whole grains and lots of vegetables and fruit is very good. Yes, I'm not saying that is not good, but whole grains may not be healthy for all. So what I always like to stress upon is what the Mediterranean diet or the DASH diet excludes. So it excludes sugar, it excludes food that essentially becomes sugar, desserts and things like that. Then it also excludes all the processed food, and it focuses more on eating real food. Now you must have heard about the use of olive oil in the Mediterranean diet. So yes, olive oil is a much healthier oil than many of the seed oils, because I have talked about this before. The seed oils like canola, sunflower, all these, they go through so much of processing. They are not one of the best oils. So if you are switching your oils from seed oil, predominantly industrial seed oil, to olive oil or maybe butter and ghee, definitely that's a much better switch than using any of the seed oils. So is it that the Mediterranean diet is beneficial because of all the wonderful, the plant chemicals present in olive oil? Yes, to some extent, but it is also important to know that if you're using olive oil, you're not using some of the industrial seed oil. So what are you leaving out? So that is very important. So always the benefits that you are going to experience is going to be different for each one, because it depends on your baseline diet. So any kind of diet which includes real food is going to be way better than a lot of processed food. That is my number one point. So what do studies show? So yes, the DASH diet, when it was actually first done in the 90s, they actually gave people food, like they were given meals, prepared meals. So obviously, if someone else is going to do your cooking and preparing, it's so much easy to stick to a diet like that. And the first studies on the DASH diet did not include people with diabetes, but later ones did. So yes, a DASH like diet would show benefits, but again, like I said, it depends on what your baseline diet. So similarly with the Mediterranean diet. Now the Mediterranean diet, for some people, what we eat is so dependent culturally on what we were used to eating, what we grew up eating. So you need to adapt it to your particular situation. Just because the Mediterranean diet includes, something that you don't like, does it necessarily mean you need to incorporate that? It depends. If you have never tried that before, maybe it's a time to experiment. Use some different flavors in your cooking, or use olive oil when you're cooking your vegetables. So try different ways of finding out what works best for you. And we all love variety. None of us likes this eating the same food every day, and that is not what our bodies are designed for. So those are the important things. Now, what do studies show? Yes, the DASH diet has shown benefits. Mediterranean diet has shown benefits. Interestingly, there are a lot of newer studies on low carbohydrate diets. So low carbohydrate diets have shown, actually, number one, people have lost weight. So weight loss is one of the best strategies to reduce your blood pressure. So if you lose weight, your blood pressure levels can come down. And weight loss, I have talked about this before, it can be as small as 5 to 10%, which is not a lot of weight loss. You may not have achieved the weight that you really want to be at, but you can already start seeing benefits when you've just lost some weight and not a whole lot. So in medical terms, significant weight loss is between 5 and 10%. So let us say if you were like 180 pounds and you just lost 9 pounds or 18 pounds, that would be considered a significant weight loss. Of course, as you know, weight loss, the problem is always in maintaining the weight loss. So if you had lost weight in the past and your blood pressure came down and you decided to get off of your medications because your blood pressure was too low on the medications when you lost weight, remember that if you regain the weight, you do need to check your blood pressure because it might have gone up. So important to keep that in mind. So weight loss can make your blood pressure fall. So talking about the low carbohydrate diet, so some of these studies were done in people with diabetes. And what they found is, using a lower carbohydrate diet, they had to reduce their blood pressure medications early on. And in some of them, this was even before they had lost significant amount of weight. So yes, weight loss can help you reduce your blood pressure, but there are benefits in addition to weight loss when you use a lower carbohydrate diet. So low carbohydrate meaning you eat more of proteins and good fat and less of starchy vegetables, whole grains, less of wheat pasta and roti and bread and all these things. And that is like a reduction of blood pressure. In studies, it has been as much as 10 to 12 millimeters of mercury. And for most medications, that is considered a very successful outcome. So weight loss along with a lower carbohydrate diet has given benefits of almost adding another new medication. So that is significant. That is really significant. So before talking about, I talked about the DASH diet, the Mediterranean diet, the low carbohydrate diet. What about salt? So here at this point, I'm going to pause a little so that if you have any questions, either you can raise your hand and I can unmute you, and this is being recorded, or feel free to chat in the type box or in the Q&A before I move to the next section and talk about salt and what does it mean for blood pressure. I don't see any questions right now. And if you think of something later on, please feel free to ask at the end, or you can even email it to me in case you go through the recording and then you think of something. So what about salt? So few things important to remember is, not everyone has salt sensitive hypertension. So some of you, okay, there's a question. Okay, so the two questions I have, one is, what foods would help with our brains in terms of neuroplasticity or memory? Are those supplements they advertise effective? So there are two questions in that. And the next is about the recording, even the first workshop last month. So I have sent the recordings, and every time I usually send the previous one. So you will receive a recording on an email. So just look out for an email from info@drkarmd.com. So what food would help in terms of neuroplasticity? So before I answer the salt question, I'm going to address your question about neuroplasticity. Uh, so neuroplasticity is basically your brain's ability to change over a period of time. So back in the days, we used to think that the brain is like, it just grows in the early years of life. And after a certain age, there isn't much you can do. So essentially, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But that is not true. So what we found is that, yes, brain cells can grow, or even if brain cells don't grow, they develop other pathways. So instead of, let us say, you're taking this pathway and there is an obstruction there, your brain has the ability to bypass that and go another way and do the same thing. So neuroplasticity is very important, and it continues throughout life. Now, the fact is, whether there are specific food that would help neuroplasticity, I'm not familiar with the research of looking at neuroplasticity and food, but your brain has to function well when it comes to, your ability to go through neuroplasticity. And for your brain to function well, it needs nutrients. And I have talked about the three foundations of brain health. Number one is optimal blood glucose levels. Number two is optimal blood pressure levels. And number three is low levels of chronic inflammation. So the goal is to have the type of food that will take care of all these three areas. Once those three foundations are taken care of, it will be much easier to now. Neuroplasticity will not only be related to your food and blood pressure and blood glucose levels. You also have to do cognitive training, things like learning new stuff or learning a new language or doing something, maybe taking up a new hobby, maybe taking up music. So doing a lot of variety of things. See, the brain loves variety. The brain loves increasing challenges. So those are the things that would help neuroplasticity along with the foundations, but only certain food are not going to, make major changes to neuroplasticity per se, if you're also not adding all these cognitive challenges and all these other things with it. When it comes to supplements, so this is my opinion, and this is again based on what I have studied and read and seen in my patients. Don't rely on magic supplements only. So some of the claims, like for example, there is one which talks about, these are the supplements that were used in the VitaCog study. I'm just giving that example because I think I read it recently again. So the VitaCog study, what did they look at? So they looked at omega-3 fatty acids levels and that's a dried blood spot test you can do. And they supplemented them with omega-3 and B vitamins. So what they found is that particular supplement, which made sure that omega-3s were normal, that one helped B vitamins function better. And B vitamins worked when omega-3s were normal. And omega-3, for the brain to do a complete turnover of all the omega-3s present, it takes about 2 years. So the point is, all these supplements work together. So will these if let us say you decide that I'm not going to bother with my food, I'm going to continue eating sugary stuff and lots of pasta, pizza, burgers, bread, and cereals, but I'm going to take this supplement religiously every day. Is that going to give you the best results? No. But if you are doing everything else and you're adding supplement which is of a therapeutic level, that is going to make a whole lot of difference. So to answer your question, simply relying only on the supplements is not enough. And some of the supplements, again, like another one is phosphatidylcholine. So PC, phosphatidylcholine is such a long term, is again considered to be good for the brain. And there are studies showing that. Now, some people feel very good when they take the phosphatidylcholine. Some people don't feel as good. But does it mean that, again, the same thing, if you're not going to do anything else and just going to take phosphatidylcholine and the VitaCog supplements, is that enough? Very likely no. And again, it's different things for different people. So you need to be, careful when you look at some of the supplements to see what are they claiming. And more importantly, were the studies done using that particular supplement, or are they, talking about something which is, this was studied in some other study, like for example, omega-3s, and they are using the omega-3 in their study. Another supplement which, because you brought up supplements, I'm going to talk about that, is for the brain, is something called exogenous ketones. So there are studies which have shown that if you take certain supplemental, this is called C8C10, those can help the brain function better because your brains are getting the energy from ketones instead of using carbohydrates or glucose from the body. So there are scientific studies showing that. And in fact, that is one supplement which, along with, even if it's a person who's not able to do all the other changes, not able to make the food changes because they, for example, they live in a retirement home where they don't decide what food they are offered. They have to eat what is given to them. They can't cook in their, in their unit. For in such people, would adding that exogenous ketones make a difference? Yes, some studies have shown that even if they've not made the other dietary changes, they are not going through cognitive cognitive training or any of that, but just added the supplement, that alone has made differences. So a rather long answer to something, to your question, but I do hope, if it answers it, let me know. If it doesn't, let me know that as well. So next comes, I was talking about salt sensitive hypertension. Um, okay, we have another question. Oh, thank you. What factors determines neuroplasticity? Under what conditions brain changes, and why? Is it true that the brain has its own immune system, and what parts made of what foods are repairing the brain? And how can we stimulate growth of new neurons and glial cells? Oh, that's like several questions together, but I'm going to try to answer. So like I said, neuroplasticity is many things. So in addition to all the things that I talk about, food, sleep, movement, your exposure to toxins, therapeutic supplementation, what are the other things? Is your vision okay? Is your hearing okay? So vision, hearing are extremely important. And I'm going to talk about vision and brain health on the 28th of July on Clubhouse. So if you receive our emails regularly, you'll receive the Clubhouse updates as well. And you can listen to the replays in case the time is not suitable for you. So yes, the brain has an immune system. The glial cells are a part of the immune system in the brain. And what is important is why your sleep is so important. So deep sleep is a time when the brain detoxifies. So that is a system called the glymphatic system, GLYMPHATIC. The glymphatic system works at night when you have deep sleep, high quality sleep. So that is when the brain detoxifies, because throughout the day, the brain is busy doing everything else, keeping you alive. So that is very important. Now, which food are repairing the brain? For the brain to function well and repair itself, obviously, all the three things about, maintaining lower blood glucose levels, low inflammation levels. Brain inflammation is something that is very, very significant for mental health challenges, for long COVID, for dementia risk, for how your brain functions today. If you have a lot of brain fog, inflammation is something that is related to that. So keeping your inflammation levels low. So number one would be, like I talked about earlier, food is one of the biggest sources of inflammation. So if you can eat mostly food that does not raise your inflammation, sitting continuously raises your inflammation and impacts brain function. So avoid sitting continuously, obviously. Even if you don't exercise all the time, exercise is extremely important for brain function as well as reducing your blood pressure. Moderate intensity exercise. But if you are not exercising today, just making sure that you move around and don't sit continuously for several hours at a stretch, that is also going to show you big benefits. Then the next is, how can we know that there is inflammation in the brain? That's a very good question, because obviously Okay, we have so many questions. This is really wonderful on inflammation and brain fog. And I think what I'm going to tell you is I talked about brain fog last month, I think it was. I'll send all the recordings of the previous one so that you can listen to that. So, how do we know if there's inflammation in the brain? Number one is certain conditions, like, for example, long COVID. We can assume that there is inflammation because we cannot really justify doing a spinal tap to see the cerebrospinal fluid to check that for inflammation when if you're not dealing with a serious condition. Some conditions like meningitis or encephalitis, any of these conditions, those are very serious conditions. Those conditions, you are in a hospital, your doctor is going to do a spinal tap and check for inflammation. I would assume that you are asking about sort of like I'm a person who's functioning, I have some brain fog, I feel my memory is not doing as well, I don't sleep well. How will I know whether I have inflammation? There are blood tests you can do. One of the commonest ones is CRP, so highly sensitive C-reactive protein, HSCRP. But that is a blood test, so that does not specify whether the inflammation is in the brain. That would specify whether there is inflammation in general. So we can't justify doing a spinal tap for, like, someone who's just got only brain fog and nothing else, versus in conditions where we are suspecting something like meningitis or encephalitis or any of these, we can do a spinal tap to look for inflammation there. I do hope that answers your question. But you can sort of, because the blood brain barrier is very important, and I've talked about this before. Leaky gut, so if your gut is not healthy, leaky blood vessels, that is heart disease, and leaky brain, they can all happen together. So we call that the leaky membrane disease. That's not a new disease, but it's basically the brain is actually, it has this blood brain barrier which does not let a lot of stuff go in. But in case, because of infections, inflammation, viral infections, a lot of other things, toxic exposure, that blood brain barrier is breached, then a lot of the body inflammation would go there as well. So I think I've answered most of the questions. What food would repair your brain? So number one is high quality protein, omega-3 fatty acids. These would be the best ones. How do we stimulate growth of new neurons? Of course, first is the fundamentals, and the next is of doing things that would stimulate the brain. Increasingly more challenging stuff. That is another thing. Movement, sleep, all the other stuff I've talked about. Hearing. So vision, why is vision so important? Because number one is, if your brain is not receiving stimulus from outside, because your vision is impacted and you have decided you're not going to wear glasses because they don't look good on you, that could be impairing your brain. So the many different ways to continue stimulating the brain. Learning a new language, but again, is that something you really want to do? Like, I'm not someone who would learn a new language, but I can spend time learning something else in my field of brain health. So depends on what you want to do. So just because learning a new language is good for the brain, does it mean I will do it? No, I don't think so. So these are all, I think I've answered all the questions. Thank you very much. Will we have resources, information of the training? That's a good question. Oh, I'm sorry. The chat is, oh, I didn't realize the chat was disabled. I think the chat is enabled for chatting with me, the panelist, but it's probably disabled for chatting between the participants. Inflammation and brain fog I've answered. I'm just making sure I reach all your questions. What is the ketone supplement you mentioned? Can you please spell it out? So this is, yes, you can get it online. And the one that is, so I'll send you the link to Dr. Stephen Cunane's research, the research paper. Now, I tried to find the exact supplement because yesterday we had a patient at the office who was experiencing cognitive decline. So it is called C8C10. And I will send a link to Dr. Stephen Cunane's research, so you can look for that supplement. And I found one on Amazon, and I have not tried it on anyone yet, so even on patients, which wasn't frightfully expensive. That was very good. How can I know if my supplement is at therapeutic level? Very good question. And one thing you could do is you could test for ketones in your in your urine. though that is not always very, a lot of people find that it's not very accurate. But at the same time, you can also go by how you feel in terms of how your brain functions. If it's about yourself, you can see the changes. If it is a loved one or someone else you're helping with using the exogenous ketones, you sometimes you can know by seeing how they do. So I've had people talk about, so coconut oil contains some of the caprylic acid and all those MCT, medium chain triglycerides, that are present in these the supplements that were tested in that particular research. And what he said is, I started giving coconut oil to my father. His father was about 82 and he was experiencing cognitive decline. And they couldn't find the exogenous ketones there, but coconut oil is easily available anywhere. And 1 tablespoon of coconut oil 3 times a day. He said in 3 days, he felt that his father was already improving in terms of his cognition. So sometimes you can see the changes. And again, there are therapeutic levels, which in that study, particular study, Dr. Cunane's study, he had seen that. But measuring ketone levels could be one way. But does it mean that you need to achieve a certain level of ketosis until you see the benefits in the brain? We don't know for sure. So you can use them and see how the person is functioning. So resources of the cognitive training, that's a very good question. I'm still trying to find, there are a whole lot of companies, you can check them online and most of them have these clinically validated already. So they are good ones. They are not just like, somebody just thought of something and said, let's just do this. So most of these are available online for cognitive training. And most of these cognitive training are like, you need to spend about 15-20 minutes every day. One company which has some research supporting their training is called Brain HQ, BRAIN HQ. So just go to brainhq.com. They have a yearly subscription of about $100 and you will get access to their brain training. It's an app, so that is easy for you to do. And they have done some research. There are, I think, more than 100 papers, but there are two very significant ones. And so the most important thing is whenever you're looking at any cognitive training, and I still haven't found one that I recommend to all my patients. I'm still trying to find which is like, the cost and everything. Look for ones that have been validated in clinical studies. It's not just someone saying, oh, this works very well for me. So look for the studies so that they have gone through the right kind of research. That is what I would recommend. Is coconut oil bad for you nutritionally? No. So I think we're going down in many different ways. So coconut oil, one of the challenges that people think is because coconut oil is like saturated fat, it is supposed to be bad for you. So the diet heart hypothesis, that means if you eat more saturated fat, you are going to get heart disease and dementia and all that. That has not held in research. Last several years, actually, that has shown that it is not really working. So coconut oil is not bad for you, but again, the fact is it depends on what type of coconut oil. Is it ultra processed or is it minimally processed? And more importantly, here I'm talking about using coconut oil as a therapeutic supplement, not necessarily only for cooking, because for you to get 1 tablespoon 3 times a day, only cooking will not be enough. So some of my patients they just drink or eat, whichever, whether the coconut oil is in a semi-solid state or liquid. They just consume it as a supplement versus having it in cooking and as a supplement. So no, blunt, my simple answer would be coconut oil is not bad for you, but it depends, number one, on the coconut oil, and it depends in the context of the rest of your food as well. So full transcription so that you could save it. Oh, okay. For the transcription of my videos, now I have tried doing that, but what has happened is I spend a lot of time editing the transcript. So what I do is I've started making them into chapters. So YouTube, you do have that ability. So you can go through only the ones that are of interest to you and not go through the whole 30-40 minutes of video. I know even I don't like watching videos, long videos myself. So the chapters option on YouTube has come up now. That takes me less time than actually editing a full transcript. So I hope that helps. And so I am going to go back to, but does smoking of tobacco and smoking marijuana? Yes. Unfortunately, the answer is both of those are very harmful for the brain. And yes, marijuana is really not really good for your brain. And I'm sorry if that answer is not like, and likewise with alcohol as well. So I'm going to come to that. So I'm going back to salt intake. So not everyone is salt sensitive, has salt sensitive hypertension. Thank you. You all have great questions. So how will you know if you have salt sensitive hypertension? There is no simple test, because the tests that they have done have been more at a research level. And from a 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure reading, there were some studies, but we don't have access to that algorithm. So that is not a practical approach. What I suggest to my patients is, number one, go through all the food that you eat. Are you eating a lot of salty food? So salt would come from a lot of processed food. A lot of processed meat has more salt. So first check all the food that you eat. Is it really high salt? So very high salt intake, regardless of your hypertension, is not good for you. But do we need to have very low salt if you have hypertension? That is a question that is not easy to answer, because not everyone has salt sensitive hypertension. So if reducing salt makes your food like absolutely tasteless and you don't feel like eating that, do you really need to do that if it's not going to impact your blood pressure? Maybe not. So number one, check for all the high salt food in your, in the food you eat every day. Processed food, adding extra salt, eating a lot of pickles. So pickles contain more salt, so see whether you're eating high salt food. Then what you can do is reduce those food and see what your blood pressure was like before and after. That is kind of a little long-winded way of knowing whether you have salt sensitive hypertension. But even if you find that your blood pressure did not change dramatically, it is a good idea to reduce very high salt intake. So very high salt intake is related to stomach cancer, poor heart health, a lot of things. But the biggest challenge is in the middle range, like how low do you need to go? That is something you will need to figure out. Some of my patients, they'll say, if I eat at this particular restaurant, I know their food is very high in salt and I can feel my blood pressure going up. I said, how do you feel your blood pressure going up? She says, oh, I get headaches, the back of my head. And I know my blood pressure is high. And if I go and measure, I find that it is so. So some people know instantly about their salt sensitivity and some people don't. So what negative changes happen in the brain? I think I will run out of time to answer that question. And I don't even know all the biochemistry with, what happens with marijuana and all that. Bottom line is, all I know is that it's not good for your brain. So in the terms of biochemistry, I don't know enough to answer that. You need to ask someone else who's more familiar with biochemistry, all the things that happen in the brain. So going back to the salt, so this is what you need to do. Does everyone with hypertension need to reduce their salt intake? Probably not, because not everyone has salt sensitive hypertension. So I'm going to go back to my slides and go to so I talked about low carb, I talked about low salt, Mediterranean diet, and all of these. What are the other things, other natural strategies you can use? And many of these things, about liquids. So another big thing is when it comes to food and liquids, alcohol. So recent studies have shown that even mild alcohol consumption. So for mild, the standard recommendation is one measure of red wine is 5 ounces for women and 2 for men is considered to be safe alcohol intake. But what it turns out, recent studies have shown that even what was considered to be safe is not really safe for the brain, because it studies have shown that even lower alcohol intake has impacted brain health. So again, I love red wine, and I know I'm not going to give up alcohol to zero. I will enjoy my red wine now and then. So it is important to know what the levels are, so that you know if you're having too much, and if that is something that you want to reduce. Alcohol is one liquid. The next liquid, which some people don't realize is very harmful for the brain, is fruit juices. Juices are not your friend. Eat the whole fruit, because once you eat the fruit, you get the fiber with it, which does not raise the high levels of fructose from fruit in a liquid form. So in a liquid form, it gets absorbed much faster, and that is not good for you at all. Then sugar sweetened beverages. Then all those sugar sweetened beverages, instead of sugar, they are like the 0 calorie ones, which have artificial sweeteners in them, like sucralose and all these others. Those are not good either. So probably one of the best things, best liquids for your brain is water with, lemon, then black tea, herbal tea, green tea, depending on what you like. I don't like the taste of green teas, and green tea has a lot of benefits. Does it mean I'm going to drink green tea? I don't think so. I would much rather drink my Darjeeling tea. Black tea, no sweetener. Then coffee with cream, if you're not intolerant to dairy, that those liquids are fine. Now, when it comes to caffeine, what happens is a lot of people find that their blood glucose levels go up when they drink more coffee. Coffee has more caffeine than tea. So that is something you need to remember. And caffeine, in some studies, have shown higher levels of homocysteine as well. Homocysteine is a blood test you can do anywhere in the world. High homocysteine is not good for the brain or the heart or your mood as well. So caffeine is kind of, some people do fine with caffeine. Some people don't metabolize caffeine as well. Some are slow metabolizers. And some people find their blood glucose levels go up when they drink more caffeine. And their blood pressure levels go up as well. So caffeine, you need to figure out whether it's right for you, whether decaf coffee would work for you. That is also something you need to figure out. So what are the additional things? Hand grip exercise, something I'm going to show you. Listening to music has shown that it can help in reducing blood pressure. Weight loss, I've already talked about. Meditation, deep breathing, exercise. So what type of exercise? Again, when it comes to exercise, the type you will do. If walking is what you like doing, yes, go ahead and do more of that. If you don't like doing weight training, but you love walking, at least walk. But if you want to know what type of exercise, muscle building exercise works better for blood glucose, for reducing inflammation, for reducing blood pressure. So moderate intensity exercise along with weight training, high intensity interval training. Most importantly, you need to like doing whatever it is, because you have to do it long term. It's not just like one day you go to the gym and you work out for 1 hour, and then for the next 1 month you don't do anything. So I was going to show the hand grip. So as you can see, I got one, but it's still in its wrapping, so I've not used this. Can you see this clearly, or is it not visible? So this is, again, I'll send the link to the video. This is what, doing these hand grip training for as little as 15 minutes a day for 3 days. And I'll send the link, and I think there's a video along with that research study. So this was actually done in a research study where they found that when people did these exercises, and again, this does not involve any medication, so not to the full extent, but what they call this is intermittent hand grip exercises, to 30% of it, they found that blood pressure levels went down. So this is something simpler to do, but the thing is, you need to remember to do it. So you need to set up a habit of when you can do it. And these are easily available from, anywhere. You can buy them at on Amazon as well. So hand grip exercise is something, and I haven't tried it on myself yet. So YouTube link, yes, I will include the YouTube link in the follow-up email. Blueberries increase the number of anti-cancer cells, cardamom, black pepper. Okay. So the question is it true that blueberries increase the number of anti-cancer T cells, cardamom, black pepper increase activity of anti-cancer cells? Very good question. But again, the thing is, eating only blueberries and not doing everything else, that is not going to give you the best results. And when it comes to cardamom or curcumin, or any of the spices you mentioned. Now, most of the studies that have been done are on higher dosage of the supplement. So instead of taking curcumin as a supplement, which will help reduce your inflammation levels, some studies have shown some anti-cancer level, activity. Can you do by just using turmeric in your food? No, because turmeric does not, the spice, and it is likewise for other spices as well. Most of the time you cannot get a therapeutic level for any of these by just adding some of those spices to your food. That is not enough. Most of the studies, curcumin is one example I always give, because curcumin is not turmeric, the spice. The spice has very low levels of what is called curcuma longa. The supplements which have shown anti-inflammatory activities, those are 95% of curcuma longa, along with piperine for better absorption. And the anti-inflammatory activity starts showing up at a higher dose. So it's most curcumin capsules are about 500 milligram. So anti-inflammatory levels are about 1500 to 2000 milligrams. So one curcumin capsule a day may not give you the results. You may need to take up to 3 to 4 a day. So dosage is important, concentration is important, quality is important. Can you get that kind of curcumin anti-inflammatory benefits from only adding turmeric to your food? No. So it is similar, and I have not checked the research on cardamom or all the other spices, but I would suspect it is similar, because the dosages required to get a therapeutic level result, like inflammation or blood glucose levels, is higher than what you would get from only food. So at this point, I don't think I have any more slides. And thank you very much for joining in. And I loved your questions. If you have any more questions that you think of later on, feel free to. This is, oh, that's a good question. What is it? I think it's called a hand grip exercise machine or something. This was like some $20 on Amazon. You can check for a whole different, there are many different ones. Find out which one works best for you. And if you think of any questions later on, feel free to email me, and see you next month. And you will receive recordings of all the previous ones, and the hypertension one I had done earlier, where I did talk about some of the supplements as well. So thank you. And bye now.